Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, should native Hawaiians form their own government? We discussed the debate going on in the US Aloha State, and we've been doing that with the help of some of our Hawaiian community. A lot of help, actually. Malika, what do you have?
Occupation, sovereignty, these are just some of the words people are sharing with the stream. So majority online, talking to us, say yes, Native Hawaiians should form their own government. Kuhio is one of them. He tweets, a government-to-government relationship with the U.S. is something afforded to all other indigenous people. Why not Hawaiians? But not everyone is convinced. The Occupy Hawaii writes, federal recognition would turn Hawaiians into a Native American tribe so that the U.S. can claim annexation by acquiescence. Well, opposing views there, but of course, we want to hear what you have to say. So tweet us using the hashtag AJStream, and you too could be in the stream.
I'm in the stream.
Native Hawaiians are deciding their political future this month as they elect delegates to represent them at a constitutional convention for self-governance. If the community forms their own government, it could get federal recognition similar to that of 566 indigenous tribes elsewhere in the United States. But Native Hawaiians have a different history from those tribes. Hawaii was its own country with bilateral treaties, including with the US, before being annexed in 1898. And because of this, the debate has been fierce. Many feel Hawaii has been under a legal occupation by the US for over 100 years. They worry that federal recognition of an indigenous government undermines their national claims. That and distrust of the organization running the vote has led some to call for a boycott. But others see the election and convention as a path to self-governance and feel that federal recognition would help with pressing social issues such as homelessness and land rights. So to help us explore this debate, we're joined by Joshua Lanakila Manuel. He's a community organizer who's running for a seat in the election from Hawaii Island. Michelle Kohane is a president and CEO of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. She's running for a seat from Oahu. Dre Kalili.
Aloha, good morning.
Good morning. Dre Kalili is a community advocate, also running in Oahu. And in Honolulu, we're joined by Tricia Kehauloni Watson, who is boycotting the election. So welcome, everybody. This idea of working out a way for there to be sovereignty with Hawaii and the United States. But the United States took Hawaii, they annexed Hawaii. Why would you even have that conversation and maybe then cede some of the historical ability to maybe Hawaii come back to what it used to be? Why would you even have that conversation? Michelle?
Why would we want federal recognition?
Why would you start that conversation? Because
sure.
At no point did Hawaii say, oh yes, we have a treaty now with the US and it's okay, you can actually come in and we're going to work together. That didn't happen.
Correct. So there is a lot of conversation at home going on about the historical past of this place, of our home, Hawaii. I think that we really need to shift the conversation about not being so much about how do we rectify the past, but how do we provide opportunities for our people for a better future. That we are clear about the historical past. We understand our history. Right. We understand that the United States has not always done well by Native indigenous people, but the United States has also done some pretty remarkable things. So we look at federal recognition, a government-to-government relationship, as an opportunity for Native Hawaiians, to have parity with other Native people of this country, and really to look towards a better future for our people. Again, not so much about rectifying the past, but trying to figure out a pathway forward to make a better future for Native Hawaiian people.
So time to move on, Joshua.
Well, definitely, I think that part of that, it really has to do with our perspective as a people. One thing, how can we move forward when there are such wrongs in our past and things that actually kept us away from pursuing on our own view forward, our own path forward. So the idea of going back and rectifying the things that were done wrong in the past isn't just an emotional push for us, but actually it has a lot of legal ramifications and things that have blocked us from being able to access our assets, that barred our people from participating in governmental processes in the past. And that's actually what pushed us way back down to some of the lowest levels on the economic scale and social scale. Hawaiians were the leading end of many of the worst statistics, and on the bottom of all the best statistics. At one point under our kingdom, we were really thriving here. So
I'm actually glad that you mentioned that, because that's actually something that someone online says similarly. This is Kapunahele, who says, we have disproportionate levels of health issues, poverty, etc. Organized assistance in the context of the culture would help. Here's another person echoing on the back of that a reason for having this vote. This is Palani on Facebook, who says, existing decisions right now must go through the U.S. government. Given that Native Hawaiians represent less than 10% of people in Hawaii, the current majority rule system makes it easy for issues important to Native Hawaiians to be overlooked. Tricia, when you read that comment from someone from Hawaii, what do you make of it? Do you agree?
Yes,
I agree
very much
that
so.
that's an issue, but I believe that the issue, people need to understand that a nation-to-nation relationship is not sovereignty. We're still subsumed under the U.S. government. And in fact, the proposed rule specifically states that. It says we would still be under the powers of Congress. And that's a problem, because if you are talking about putting our current land base, which is actually tremendous, if you look at what the kingdom left to Hawaiians, Congress has been highly problematic in taking away lands from Native American Indian tribes. If you look at just the Apache last year, Congress took away 2,400 acres of land and gave it away to a mining company. So I think there are some very, very serious dangers in a nation-to-nation relationship that haven't been fully articulated to the Hawaiian community, and the Hawaiian community hasn't had meaningful opportunity to discuss among themselves.
Joshua, I heard you pipe up there. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just about to agree too with that, the same notion, how you see what happened with the Apache people, not to mention that was some of their most sacred lands. And that's similar things that we face here in Hawaii, where some of our very ancient sacred sites to our people are being threatened because we don't have control of our land base.
Let me show you a page.
I just wanted to respond to a point
go
that
ahead,
Tricia
Greg.
made. So I know that there are many instances in which Indigenous people haven't been the United States government hasn't done right by them, and the same is true of us. However, the Apache land, isn't. I'm not very familiar with that, but I am familiar with many other opportunities that have been granted to a number of other tribes that enable them to control their own assets, to be self-governing, and I think we're overlooking those examples, and those are opportunities of things that we could absolutely have. I mean, you look at Navajo Nation, their constitution outlines the requirements of their president. It says their president has to speak Navajo. Wouldn't we love to have a leader of our government have to speak our Native Hawaiian language? You have other examples like tribes that have their own bar association. You don't need a legal degree from a Western institution. We just need people to demonstrate that they could exercise their own laws. Like, that is an incredible example of exercising sovereignty. And granted, we would be under the if the rulemaking passes and we establish a government that is recognized by the United States through that process, we have an opportunity to exercise sovereignty in those ways too.
But again, it's not sovereignty, it's domestic dependent nation status. And in fact, it specifically is, a quote from a very famous Supreme Court case, would be wards to their guardian. And Hawaiians don't want to be wards to a guardian. And I disagree that this has worked out great for every tribe. Certainly there are cases, but there are many, many where they're not. If you go to the Human Rights Report that was just submitted, I think last year, maybe even this year, I have a quote which says, and this is directly from people within the Choctaw and Cherokee people, federal recognition is a flawed and arbitrary process with the primary objective being forced assimilation. So these are reports going into the Human Rights Commission. So I disagree that everything's going to come up roses. We don't know that. And the rule is, in fact, specific. We wouldn't have access to federal lands. We wouldn't have access to state lands. We don't get additional programs. It protects legal protections that the rule already feels is adequately protected because they were created by Congress. So there really is nothing for us to gain, and it certainly shouldn't be pursued without all Hawaiians having opportunity to look at all the varied options out here.
Trisha, just take a pause for a second, because our community also want to join in the conversation with you. Go ahead, Malika.
Well, Michelle, I'm going to direct this to you because some of the things that Trisha was mentioning, I'm hearing online also. So this is someone who sent us a video comment. Have a look.
How'd you like to be a part of a Native Hawaiian governing entity where you could only negotiate for your ancestral lands, but there'd be no guarantee that you would actually get them? Or be a member of a Native Hawaiian governing entity where your membership is determined by blood quantum, and that membership is voluntary. So if you don't want to be a member of it, you become ineligible for any federal entitlements that are earmarked for your race, and you don't get to apply or access them anymore. That's federal recognition.
So Michelle, she sums it up, but what she says is really there are no guarantees here.
There's no guarantee in anything. There's no guarantee there's going to be a tomorrow. So I think that the idea about guarantees, we have to get past that. We have to take some risk. We have to make some decisions based on what we know today. The notion about the federal government being able to take over lands, you folks are coming from the assumption that we have all that land now. We don't. And there will always be a negotiation, even if you seek total independence. If we try to work towards restoration of the kingdom, there is no guarantee that we get all the lands. There still is negotiation that needs to take place. We have private landowners. Over the last 120 years, a lot has happened. And to make the assumption that we just get it all back, carte blanche, is not reality. It simply
So much
is
of
not
the assumption
reality.
is a matter of actually pursuing justice. And for me, I like to take the perspective that America wants to put its claim that it is the land of freedom and justice. Well, then, with the apology bill that Clinton put out back in the late 90s, they've acknowledged the crimes that they committed, that they were a part of.
Correct.
And therefore, it's a matter of now rectifying and making those things making these things correct. And
Correct.
so in that is our not just a matter of we're basically, that's telling us that we need to negotiate with thieves to get back our property. Where if in the eyes of justice, they would recognize that it was thievery, and therefore, what is the proper ramifications? How do they give that back? And because a lot of these lands that we're talking about, state lands and stuff, those are crown lands.
See,
They like to use
Lanakila,
the word ceded lands, but if you look, there is never a time that these lands were ceded.
See, Lanakila,
so-
I'm looking at your page here because the vote runs now until the end of November. On my laptop here, I have you as a candidate. So you're negotiating with thieves, to quote you back to yourself.
I'm sorry, what was that? I lost that last part.
Yeah. I'm looking at your page as a candidate for this constitutional convention, okay? And you're here as a candidate, Joshua Lanakila Managui. And it says here that you've got Hawaiian ancestry, that you're actually going to be a candidate. So you are negotiating with thieves, to quote you back to yourself.
I'm actually, it's been quite an interesting experience to running this, but I'm actually running in protest. And that part of that has to do with the proxy voting, in which my name showed up on the list without my consent in this nation building process, which you will find is another massive flaw in this Na'Iaupuni convention.
So just to make this clear, you are a candidate or you're not a candidate? Because if you're not, we can move on.
I am a running candidate, and I'm running as basically to be a voice for the many that are shut out, and actually to demand go into this process and call out the flaws. So kind of running inside the process in order to point out or else it's going to run unchecked. So I've openly
So
running
I think
in
Lanakila's,
protest.
Yes, Michelle.
I think that I would just like to say that Lanakila's reason for running is that exactly why we are proposing that this is an initial step towards justice for Hawaiian people, that Dre and I are agreeing exactly what you're saying, Lanakila. That is the reality that we live in today. You might not agree with Na'Iaupuni, but you're very much going to engage to make sure that your voice is heard at this process. Kuhio, when he passed the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, did he sign the Ku'e petition? Were they against it? Sure. but he didn't sit around waiting for everything to come back. He, in fact, became a delegate in the government that was put before them by the United States and negotiated, again, had to negotiate 200,000 acres of land for the settlement of Native Hawaiians, which is what we have today. So we're left with a government that we might not have total agreement with, but we have to work within the realities of today. And so we are saying, yes,
And
we have a
Michelle,
United
I wanna-
States
I'd like
government.
to say something. I'd like to jump in. I mean, I think part of the problem is, shouldn't the question have come first, which direction we want to go in? Why is there a
Right,
constitution
exactly.
being written when Hawaiians haven't even been really talked to? This is a very, very different time than what Kuhio faced. Prince Kuhio was he was a descendant to the throne. He does eventually go into Congress, but you're looking at a time when there are tens of thousands of Hawaiians left on Earth. Today, there are over 527,000 Hawaiians who have identified themselves as being in the United States. But the problem is, only 30,000 are required to pass something. That's 5% of the population, who in theory could make the decision for all Hawaiians. Really, what should have come first was education, and then a referendum about the direction we want to go in. Hawaii is the United States' Catalonia. And that's what people need to recognize, is that what people want is independence, and allowing 40 people who have barely been vetted to go in and make the decision for 527,000 is ridiculous.
So Trisha, picking up on that, I want to read this Facebook comment we got from Kiokani. He says, if the U.S. was sincere about federally recognizing Kanaka Maoli, or the First Peoples of Hawaii, as an indigenous tribe of so-called Native Hawaiians, it wouldn't have taken 117 years. So Dre, I want to pass that to you based on what Trisha was saying about why wasn't there a referendum? Why is it that just now in 2015 we're even seeing this vote?
Well, I don't know that seeking federal recognition was a priority for our community 20 years ago or leading up until that point. I think a lot of the, what we today are seeking through federal recognition, I think in some ways we had. And I'm referring to the Ali'i Trust, to programs that provided support and services to the Native Hawaiian community here. Those were challenged, 20 or so years ago. And I think that was really a catalyst to this interest in pursuing federal recognition. So, why did it take 117 years? I think there are questions. That's a good question. And I think there are solid answers to that. However, to what Trisha was saying about a referendum, there have been a lot of criticisms of the process, and cart, horse, chicken, egg, but what we have today is an opportunity to move forward, an opportunity to address problems that we have in our community. I mean, all four of us, I think, are on the same page about the needs of our community being disenfranchised in our own homelands, I think being disconnected from so many things that are still very important to us. How do we address those today? I mean, we are disenfranchised, right? We are disconnected from the decision makers who decide what happens here in Hawaii. How do we rectify that? And to me, the Na'iaupuni Constitutional Convention and the DOI rulemaking are opportunities that create paths that, for me and in my opinion, we can see if we follow them, we can take steps in the direction to help address the problems that we have. I don't see an alternative today that does that.
Trisha, do you see an
But
alternative?
there are alternatives. I do. I absolutely do. And I think there should have been, and there's still money available. So the Hawaiian people are not entirely destitute. That's what people need to understand. We have various trust and state resources and federal resources that are already at our disposal. There needs to be an absolute stop to this process that's underway. And there needs to be time to go out and educate all Hawaiians. And you don't have to reach every
Trisha,
single
just
one.
hold tight for a moment, because I'm just looking
Sure.
here for in a second, because you said there needs to be a stop to this process. I'm actually right here. If I was Native Hawaiian, I would be able to vote right now or send in my vote between now and the end of November. How can you stop the process, realistically?
Well, I mean,
That
they
wasn't,
could
that
decide
wasn't a
not to hold
serious
the
suggestion
convention.
that you just made. It's too late, surely.
No, it's not. I don't believe it's too late at all.
What
They
would
can-
have to happen for it to stop?
the nonprofit that runs it. So it's just a nonprofit. Understand that. It's not an entity, it's not a state entity. It's basically 5 individuals who got together and decided to form a nonprofit that run this. They also have absolute authority to put a stop to it at any time. So, and I think the fact that these 5 people were not elected by the Hawaiian people are not, there was no discussion about when we were going to have this, how we were going to have this, the process is hugely problematic and some serious, serious violations of UN DRIP, so which is the UN Declaration of the Rights on Indigenous People. So I think at any time, this entity, just as they sort of spontaneously decided to move this forward, can also decide to stop it.
Let me show you something. This is Sally Jewell. She's the US Secretary of the Interior. She said this at the end of September of this year. The United States has a long-standing policy of supporting self-governance for Native peoples, yet the benefits of the government-to-government relationship have long been denied to Native Hawaiians, one of our nation's largest Indigenous communities. I'm just wondering, Michelle, what the relationship is like right now between Hawaii and the federal government as this debate is warring on between Native Hawaiians.
So to further explain what Secretary Jewell is talking about, in tribal communities, Native Americans and Alaska Natives, they have an existing government-to-government relationship. Their elected tribal leaders are not have a clearly defined relationship with the federal government. They're not making visits, talking to every clerk and staff level person. They are in direct negotiations with the secretary, with assistant secretaries, talking about programming and funding and other resources to be made available for their people. Hawaiians right now, and I think that Lanakila's activism and his good work on Mauna Kea is a perfect example. Hawaiians are tucked somewhere under the Department of Land and Natural Resources, trying to advocate for what is best for that sacred place. And our communities are just frustrated with a poor management plan by the state of Hawaii and the Department of Land and Natural Resources. We are having to use community activism over government to government and having a direct relationship where Native Hawaiians can speak for themselves and have a seat at the table with other government structures so that we can be heard, so that we can make better decisions for ourselves. And so we're not saying that federal government, this nation within a nation relationship is the end all be all, but it is definitely the tool that's available to us today. We believe that we should grab hold of the tool that's in front of us now. When we talk about the realities of what independence and that timeline and plan would look like,
all right, so Michelle,
what are the next steps?
I specifically asked you
a lot of that.
Yeah, Trisha, I'm going to take that disagreement to our post show because I'm almost out of time in the main show. I did specifically ask about the US relationship with Hawaii, Michelle. Malika, what did you want to add?
I want to end with this comment from Palani, who writes on Facebook, I don't see the U.S. ever granting Hawaii full independence. We could fight and never achieve it, or we could settle on a federally recognized government that has the benefit of making progress. So seemingly the lesser of two evils, he's writing.
Sure. Joshua, as this whole ballot process comes to an end at the end of the month, what is your selling point? What are you saying you as a candidate can do in a sentence?
Well, in this process, I know I've been opening is actually exactly what because we're talking about in the idea of we need this process to really be slowed down, if not stopped altogether, because the proper education has not been given out there. Literally, this thing blew up in 4 months. Now, how can you build any foundation on a strong platform in 4 months?
That's extreme. So you're hearing a little bit of this debate right here with Lanakila and Michelle, Andre and Trisha. We're taking that conversation online at stream.outerzero.com. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you online too. Take care. Hello, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're getting right back to our conversation about a potential federally recognised self-government for native Hawaiians. Something that Tricia doesn't want to happen, or at least not yet. Tricia, you disagreed in such a huge way. I thought this disagreement is not big enough for the end of the main show. I'm taking it to the post show. Go ahead. What did you want to say, Tricia?
Well, I think the main point is that Hawaiians really, and all of them, deserve the opportunity to have more education. I pride myself on being an advocate for the community, and I have watched my community catastrophically alienated through this process. And I think that's a problem. And I think there's a lot of misinformation and scare tactics being used as a justification for moving this forward simply
Can you give
too
us
quickly.
an example?
Hawaiians out there are
What's the misinformation?
So, for example, that we don't have any ongoing relationship to government discussions. That's something that's entirely within the realm of the federal government to decide to do now. If you look at the National Historic Preservation Act, they've made tremendous strides through regulatory processes to have engagement and consultation with Native Hawaiians. So it's untrue that we don't have rights, that we're completely alienated. We negotiate with the U.S. all the time now. The
Right,
problem
but the
is
negotiations are colored by lack of a formal relationship, and it
I
makes
totally
the
disagree
negotiations
with
and
that.
relationship harder.
I totally disagree with that. I just came from meeting with the National Park Service on the continent. Native Hawaiians, that's just absolutely categorically untrue. And we're failing to recognize that to move a group this large into domestic dependent nation status potentially has huge adverse effects on other unrecognized tribes and the indigenous people of the Pacific. What's next? Asking American Samoans to go through the same process, or the Chamorros in Guam? So again, I don't think everything's been discussed. I don't think there's been good feasibility studies on the impacts of this, just not on us, but on other indigenous groups. And I think, like we've seen in Scotland and Catalonia, we at least need opportunity as a larger group to have a discussion and decide which direction we want to go in. And that's been absolutely denied to Native Hawaiians. And that is highly problematic and makes this whole process incredibly suspect.
So Michelle, you
Well,
heard some of Tricia's concerns there. I want to share another concern that's online. This is Michael Lan, who says, the federal recognition means we recognize U.S.'s crimes, we forgive them, we relinquish our rights for redress and restoration of the true sovereign. And she goes on to say, federal recognition is a way for the U.S. to show the UN its collaboration with indigenous people, but not really give us the self-determination that we want. So how would you address that fear, Michelle?
Yeah, I just disagree with that notion that by having federal recognition, we're giving up all claims to anything. That's just not true. We keep comparing ourselves to Native Americans, and we talk about the 566 tribes who it may not be perfect, but we have not heard one tribe say, we don't want federal recognition. Federal recognition, we want to undo that. That they have. It's not perfect, but it takes some negotiation. Yes, absolutely. Everything does. But it's a way forward, and it has created tremendous opportunity for those people. So I just disagree with that statement completely.
So Michelle, if you look at certain situations that are in the Native American community, there are parallels with certain situations that are happening to Native Hawaiians in terms of access to education, in terms of homelessness, in terms of level of income. So there are parallels there. So you could argue maybe those government programs and that federal relationship isn't necessarily helping Native Americans. Why would it help Native Hawaiians?
I think that it is absolutely helping Native American communities. That at the council, we work very closely with the Alaska Federation of Natives and the National Congress of American Indians and those leaders. And federal recognition has opened many doors for those people in terms of education, in terms of self-governance, in terms of protecting their sacred places, in terms of returning lands. We talk about lands being taken, but the federal government has also helped these tribes in some instances to put land back into their trust. Like I said, there's
But
always
that's
going
not
to
a
be
good
good and
comparison.
bad to each
The principle of that
situation.
again too is that America, look what they did to them. So to just to be looking at like, oh well, they helped them now. It's like Well, they slaughtered them first. We're in a little different situation. We didn't face the types of wars and slaughter that
That was
many
before
of our Native
federal
American,
recognition,
Ohana
Lanakila.
But the
did.
problem is also, if you look at the Alaskan model, it required a settlement, right? So that was the whole point of the Alaskan Claims Settlement Act. They did relinquish all their rights. It was a complete settlement prior to all of this. And again,
We're not
Native
asking.
Hawaiians are simply asking, let's have a conversation about this before we move forward. But you just brought up the Alaskan model. You just did. You said this works for Alaskans.
And Tricia, the Alaskan model was
Joshua,
decided
Joshua,
by
hold
the
tight for a
Alaska
moment.
Native
I'll come to you in a minute because I can't hear you and Michelle.
It's been told to me directly from people who speak with President Obama that they need this done now before he leaves office. So even this rushed timeline is to support the federal recognition, because there's a whole thing about, we need to do it before Obama leaves office. So I mean, that's why who can do a constitutional convention and write up a
All right, we lost
we
Josh.
were only given the option to start voting and everything a few months ago. This is a process that should take a few years, even in the dialogue and in creating the Constitution.
So
But just
it's
to
taken 16
fast forward
years
and
so far,
steamroll
Joshua.
ahead,
How many more years
that's
do you
what I'm saying. We
need?
need to slow down and properly educate our people first. Right now, we're being pushed down this cattle chute
Right.
and being told there's no other option, or we have to do it this way. But we're saying no. I can recognize that it is the type of process that we need. But the way that this one has been created, and the way, and the past histories of how it was created was on the name,
Right.
on the back of thousands and thousands of names of people who did not even know that this was going on.
All right, I guess this is
So-
really interesting because we've come to a complete impasse. But we really understand the conversations that Native Hawaiians are having right now, and some even wanting to stop that conversation altogether, or at least slow it down. Let me just go back to Malika for a final comment from our online community.
Where there is also an impasse. So I'll read you two comments that kind of elucidate what people online are saying. This is one person who says this process is a scam to manufacture consent of people to give up their sovereign claims to the land. And on the other hand, you see tweets like this who says, yes, Hawaiians should seek a federally recognized self-government because to be unrecognized is to be invisible. Visibility is power, and the status quo hasn't proved very helpful.
It's ironic, isn't it, that a process that you would think would bring together Native Hawaiians is actually making them have fierce debates as that process is ongoing. Lanakila and Michelle and Dre and Tricia, thank you for giving us insight into the conversation that's happening right now in Hawaii. We really appreciate your time today. Take care, everybody.